Hey, all, it's KR, King of D&D Homebrew, talking today about how much magic should you have in the world. This is often called whether you should have a high magic or low magic setting, and really refers, in my mind, to what's the availability of magic items. Are they easy to come by? Can you just purchase them? Are they rare? What are the consequences of having those items? This comes up in a system, I think a lot like D&D 5e or Pathfinder, where places where you can purchase items, not so much in like Cimarron or Ironsworn or something like. There are low magic settings. So overall, my first recommendation is you should try a low magic setting in your first Homebrewed sandbox campaign. Because, you've got enough to worry about creating the world, running it, managing players, managing their leveling up and getting balancing encounters and whatnot, without dealing with the implications of, let's say, a high magic setting where they can just go and buy things as they accumulate gold and treasure. You tell your players up front or session 0, however, we're going to have a low magic setting. Then what you want to work on is creating compelling storylines and get your players invested in those storylines and their characters' relationships to them so that they're not so concerned about the lack of magic items. But of course, there is an inherent tension here. This topic came up the other night. I was talking to a couple of very experienced GMs, and just kind of spontaneously, we all said, oh yeah, I really like low magic settings. But almost in the same breath, we said, but the players like high magic settings. And I've had this discussion with other GMs where they talk about their desire to rein in magic at some point, and the players' desire to have their characters be as cool as possible, and that means magic items. They read about them in the books. They see about them all over the internet, on YouTube, wherever, and they want to play with them. And I totally understand that as a player. I see these items. I've read them all from the earliest editions, all sorts of systems. I want to see, how do they work in battle? How do they interact with the characteristics of my player and my class? And, what stories do they contain? Sentient items and that sort of thing. And I know 5e tried to sort of control this proliferation with the attunement rules, but of course, you could have, let's say you got a bag of holding and all these items, and you can attune, swap out items after a short rest. It doesn't really solve it. And the other thing about a high magic or mid magic, whatever you want to say, is if you're giving the players all sorts of items, should you give them to your NPCs, your monsters, and this and that? There's that favoring the players' NPCs, and they don't get death saves, and sometimes they have group initiative or something like that, and this is to favor the players, so they get all the items. Well, I don't know. But when you give your NPCs all sorts of items, one, you got to calculate all that when they're having battles or when they're planning, and the enemy is thinking about things. What items do they have? How does this help them? Crystal ball helps considerably and stuff like that. But two, if you have a bunch of bandits with items, swords and armor, and the players defeat them, they suddenly have this huge haul, right? And what I've noticed with higher level campaigns in a high magic setting is the GMs have to create these specialized monsters with, legendary actions and lair effects and massive amounts of hit points. And so now you're in some bloat battle, right? How interesting is that, even though the players are able to utilize all these items? But having said that, you can certainly do that if you feel experienced enough, if you've run before in a mid or high magic setting. As I say, I'm recommending it certainly for your first campaign as a GM, but I think it's a good idea generally, and I think there's a couple of things you can do here to justify this. Because when you think of the logic of the, web of magic or mana or veil or whatever it is in your system that describes that, it's going to bump up against the logic of a world that we all have in terms of our awareness of the real world. Because if magic items can be crafted by a number of, not even super powerful characters, they're going to grow exponentially by logic. Because more and more people are going to continue to create them. They have all sorts of downtime. They're just going to making these items unless the materials for these items are limited, which is one way that you can justify this, or unless you have the practitioners of magic get together and say, listen, we've got to be careful about this. We can't have items proliferating all around the world. Think of the nuclear bomb. There are proliferation treaties through which they're trying to limit the number of countries that get nuclear Bombs, now again, it's every couple of years somebody gets into that club, right? But they just don't want every country out there to get it, or, bad actors. And I think that would be something that these practitioners might practice. They might try to limit the number of magic items. Don't just be crafting, +3 swords all over the place to make money. Because the other aspect of magic weapons is they are durable goods, right? If it's not a consumable item, if it's something that's permanent, people are going to make them and sell them. Think about, cars, boats, appliances, all sorts of things in our culture that people buy and then sell used, right? And they go sell it to person, depending on the durability of that good. Well, that's what you'd have with maybe a sword gets dinged up, although it's a magic sword, so I guess not. But certainly rings, wands and staves, if you don't limit them, people are going to be making these, they're going to be selling these. This is where you start to get into the Walmart of, magic in a lot of campaigns and I've been in them where after every few runs, we get some cash, we just run down to the store and stock up on items. There's no limit put on them. And that's why I like a frontier setting, as I've said before, where you don't have that many people in the cities and settlements. You don't have that many powerful enough people to be crafting items. And I tend to make these high-level items a closely held secret. Maybe the players will get to that level, because that's another thing about if they get high enough level and they concentrate on that, they can craft these items. But they are also steeped in this culture where you keep this a secret. If you have a system like a Pathfinder system where the level of a city dictates how much the type of magic, the power, it's tied to the level of the item, you can just have no more than a level 4 city, maybe one level 5, something like that. Now, again, the players, if they look through the book, they're going to see all these items that are level 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, and they're going to say, we can't get those. Well, that's the world I'm running. Because I do think that it starts, for me, to create an imbalanced system and non-logical. Because here's the thing. If you had players with all sorts of high-level magic items, there would be other groups trying to get them, trying to steal them, trying to kill them. Rich people will collect all of the rare items, the Picassos, the Rembrandts of the world. And, the famous bank robber, Willie Sutton, was asked, why do you rob banks? And he said, because that's where the money is. The money for NPCs, whatever, a dragon, whatever, is treasure, magic items. So in order of a low magic setting, you don't have as many people in your world. You limit by the practitioners of this magic how much they're making. Then the other thing you can do, and perhaps the most interesting, is to create more consumable or more items that can run out of charge. So wands and staves have, like in the old days, a certain number of charges. Now, it used to be D100 charges, right? And you don't have to have that. You can have D110, 120, whatever it is. That's how many are left. And do the players, when they identify the item, they know how many charges? We didn't used to say. You just think, and all of a sudden it ran out. Maybe you tell the players has 10 charges, has 5 charges. Maybe you up, if it's a fireball wand, instead of 66, it's 86 or something. It has 3 charges, and then it's out. Because limiting charges makes the players then use that in a specialized situation. But if you have a fireball wand, even if it's got 1 charge a day, that's a significant shift. Now, again, do you have, because a lot of them have, let's say, 6 charges, and the last charge, if you use it, there's a chance you could destroy the wand, or, it runs out. People will hang on to that. But then the next day they get, the 6 or whatever it is. Again, that's such a powerful item. That changes the group's ability to do damage in such a way, which is why you don't like to give them out. Another aspect of having all these magic items is their destructive power, which ties into powerful magic-using figures, NPCs, whether it's divine or arcane. And that is the destructive results of such a proliferation. Because since people are going to be trying to get them, steal them, take them by force, they're going to accumulate them, and they're going to be then using them. You have people with these powerful magic items blasting away at each other or whatnot. And in a logic sort of way about a society, this would be another reason why we don't have, some minor country with nuclear weapons. Because if they are, not as sophisticated, irresponsible, or irresponsible individuals get a hold of some wand, and they just start blasting people in a bar. They get mad, they're drunk, whatever. That's pretty nasty, right? And you say, well, a drunk magic user could do the same thing. Well, maybe, but again, we're looking at who's using this wand, who can use it, what are the abilities required depending on your system. This would be a reason why these items should not be carried around. And so you do have, I've seen settings where really low magic, where if you get caught with magic or using magic, you're arrested and all your stuff taken. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that. What I'm saying is you're thinking of the implications of having these magic items in terms of their effect on society when talking about why you're having a low magic setting to the players. And I'd say the final thing about having a low magic setting is that it makes those items that are rare so much more interesting to the players to find. You can set up legends and rumors. They hear about some tomb that's been lost and, presumed to have all these magic items of some great king. The items themselves, you can have powerful items, but the players recognize that these might be better given to as a gift to some powerful figure. Of course, hoping that they'll remunerate you, but not necessarily to be, hung on to because they're going to be dangerous. And then finally, you are emphasizing the fact that what D&D is about is investment in a storyline. The Adventure Path, they have their storylines, but I'm always talking about a Homebrew sandbox where you've created these storylines and they don't have a set thing that's going to happen. It's the player's involvement in that storyline that's going to make things go. And that becomes more interesting for players than the mere accumulation of items. Looking through those lists. Now I want to get this striking rune, and then I can get this +1 rune, and then I can get this and that. They'll take whatever you give them. But they're not necessarily going to miss them if they're not there, if that story is compelling and they're invested in it. And I think this helps you do that when you create a lower magic setting, in my opinion. And I'd like to thank my Patreon members here. I just started this. Thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be doing my first Patreon PDF this Monday, which is about some magic items I've created that I feel like kind of work in a low magic setting. And then my Patreon video is going to be on how to use the rule of cool in your world, no matter what the system is. So I hope to see more of you guys supporting on the Patreon. And of course, to all my viewers, please subscribe if you want. I'd love to have more. I'd love to hear comments on what level of magic you use in your setting. And of course, most importantly, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.